this analyzing of every minute detail of their life. Oh, if you don't hold their hand on the slide until they're 4, they're going to have attachment issues. It's like literally
But don't tell them you're proud of them or they're going to be fucked up.
Yeah.
It's insane. It's insane.
Okay, so let's record the intro now.
So what is Milkless? Because I think we start with the name.
2 dads. We love our kids. But then we also need them to know that we're like pretty cool and it's not like a wimpy podcast. So, hey. Hey, Milkless.
Hey, welcome. Hey,
Milkless. Call the audience, Milkless. What's up, Milkless? Matt and Max coming at you.
What if that's it? That's our first take.
All right, Matt, let's do it. Another When Equals Now. You got the topic. I don't know what it is. Why don't you dive us right in? We're not going to round it. We're just going to dive.
What do we
got?
Hopefully the When Equals Now are a little less intense this week. I feel like last week we had like serious health scares and the death of innocence.
Yeah.
This week's maybe a little less aggressive. You doing all right, by the way?
I'm doing great, but you never know with Matt Naylor. I mean, you're either going to get poetry or tears, and I'm down to clown.
I'll try not to go too hard in the paint this time. Well, do you ever have that thing where it's like there's kind of an idea that you hear from somewhere and it strikes you as interesting, and then suddenly you feel like you're seeing it everywhere?
Yeah, like when you have like a scab on your elbow and it just touches everything. It's like I never used my elbow this much.
Yeah, exactly.
Everywhere. So yeah.
Exactly. So like I've just like 3 times in the last week had these reminders to like from various sources. My dad sent me this random article from The Atlantic. And then I had this thing with my 2-year-old that we made an Instagram thing about. And then I had an interaction with my 6-year-old, and all of them are just pointing to like doing less for my kids. And the most intense kind of example of it, or not intense, just like the most impactful one has been since my 6-year-old started back at school. She had been in a class that was 3 to 6-year-olds because she's in Montessori, and now she's in 6 to 9. And so the class is more demanding. She's no longer like the big kid on the playground. She's like getting told what to play at recess by the older kids, where she used to kind of set the rules. And so she's been coming home, and I'll be honest, man, it's been a little rough because we asked that girl to do anything and she doesn't use the words "fuck you," but that's the tone.
Yeah. What's the implied?
That's the implied. Yeah, there's a silent "fuck you."
Yeah.
And it's been a struggle, man. It's been frustrating. We've had a lot of conflict lately. I don't feel like I've been doing a great job. I've been pissed at her a lot. And we had this kind of like big stink the other night where she just wouldn't, like I was trying to get her to bed. She wouldn't go to bed. I asked her to lie down while I read. She wouldn't lie down. And I was like, if you want me to be in here reading to you, I need you to lie down. And she was like, I don't think it's that big a deal that I lie down. And I was like, yes, it's not that big a deal that you lie down, but you have a hard time going to bed and you're doing and it was just dumb, like a little thing. But ultimately, like after we kind of had this like very unpleasant explosion where in the middle of it, I started to really lose my shit. And then I was like, I gotta go outside right now. I gotta go outside. I'll be right back. And I just walked out the door and opened the garage and went out into the driveway for like 5 minutes, came back. We had a good conversation, but ultimately where we heard each other really. And ultimately what she said is she's like, I feel like you're just telling me what to do too much. And some of that is her, but some of that I realized that like I had not made an adjustment for a while in like how I was treating her. And it was just time for me to, one, tell her what to do less, but like also like, okay, well then that means you're going to do this for yourself. You're going to do this for yourself. You're going to do this for yourself.
Yeah.
And it's so far, so good. Early returns.
Wow. Okay. So you made me think so many different things all at once. I'll probably only remember one of them, but one is like, it's a thing we've said before. It's like, it's so hard when it's a moving target where you're talking baby talk with your baby. And then the next thing you know, oh shit, I should be using full sentences. Like we've all met somebody who has like a 2.5, 3-year-old and they're saying like, do somebody want some breakfast? Like, and it's like, oh my gosh, no, this 3-year-old should be getting full sentences.
Yeah.
You know,
You got to adjust.
So,
yeah.
So it's adjusting. The other thing maybe you maybe think of is like, it's so hard being a parent because it is that milkless middle. We want quick solutions. So I know we're working on this to be more aware of this and trying to find the middle. But I know deep down you kind of want like, okay, what's the answer? Oh, we just do this now. And that solves it.
Yeah.
The problem is when you were saying it, I had a realization of my own that it's like the reason I want my daughter to lay down is because when they lay down, the stories and the songs are just trying to calm their body down so that they fall asleep quicker. Sure, it's not a big deal, but it can be a death by 1,000 cuts. So
yeah,
that's what's hard is like, there is no, oh, Matt, what's your fucking problem? Let her sit up all the time. It isn't that easy because then it's like, okay, then if you're doing 10, 10, 10 or going back in and stuff, the bedtime that maybe would have taken 8 minutes, like you leave, you come back in 10 minutes to check, she's asleep.
Yeah.
Now she's there. She's awake.
Yeah.
Because she hadn't started the wind down phase. So it's like, it's that whole thing of like, pick your battles. Like, when do you do it?
Yeah.
That's the tough thing is like,
there's not a right answer.
On top of it, she's going through something. So it's like, okay, you got to acquiesce a little bit. But here's the fucked up thing. It isn't just as simple as like, just always let her sit up.
What was interesting that came out of the conversation, and it kind of led to like this like almost fundamental adjustment in the way I was thinking about things. Cause she was like, why are you telling me to sit up? It doesn't feel like that big a deal. It feels like you're just on my fucking case. But ultimately my response was like, okay, well, if you don't want to do anything I'm telling you, why don't you just get yourself to sleep and I'll just leave. And then she literally got in front of the door and blocked the door. And she's like, you're not leaving. I'm like, okay, now you're telling me what to do. And so if you need my help getting you to bed, then you need to listen to some of these things I'm saying to you. Mm-hmm. The trade-off, if you don't want me telling you what to do at bedtime, then you can get yourself to bed. Mm-hmm. And I think that like those two things feel like they're really, really correlated, where it's like, okay, if you don't want me up in your business about that, that's fine. But that means you have more responsibility now. And like, if you can be in charge of this thing, okay, well then I don't get to tell you what to do about it. But as long as you need me for that, then it is fair for me to have some say in how this goes.
Yeah. The only problem with that is I feel like that's very logic based. And it reminds me of what happened to me last night, where, as we know, our kids are watching Seinfeld now, and we put the 4-year-old to bed ahead of time. And then we stayed up so she went to bed at like, I think 7:10. And we were going to watch like 1 or 2 more Seinfelds till like 7:45, maybe 8 with the 7 and 9-year-old. And 7-year-old makes a deal with the devil. I knew what I was doing. He's like, 1 more. And we're like, to 8. And I'm like, okay, if we go till 8 though, then, you're putting yourself to bed, and I'll just, you pee, brush, pajamas. I'll come in and just give you a little check. Well, 10 circle scratches on your back. Done. And then it's like always, they don't have that logic brain. I go in and they're like, I never should have done that.
Totally. But I do think, because you're right, it is super logic based. And when they're like dysregulated or they're tired or it's bedtime, that's not gonna work. But what happened is like the next day I kind of came back and I was like, I just want you to know that I really heard you, that you feel like I'm too much up in your business. And I think this has to do with school. And we talked about those dynamics at school that are making it harder for her to stomach when we make requests of her when she gets home. Mm-hmm. But we kind of like in the calm, cold light of day, the next day talked about like, hey, here's what I think's going on. And here's what I'm hearing you tell me that you need, but here's what that's going to mean. And so like the next morning, like I woke up and she was like, Dad, can I have a bagel with cream cheese? And I was like, yeah, you know where it all is. And she gave me this look like, what the fuck? And I was like, hey, okay, you want to be treated like you're more capable? You want to be treated like this? That's fine. But like, that's a thing you can do. Mm-hmm. So like, we've had a couple of like back and forth since then. They were unpleasant, Like this weekend, I took him to a playground. I took the kids out of the house Sunday morning to give my wife a quiet house. We were going to go to the playground, and then it was going to be a real kid centric kind of day. Playground, candy shop, crystal shop. But then I asked him to leave. I was like, all right, if we're going to do all these things for 2-year-old's nap, we got to go and leave the playground. And I had to ask him to leave the playground 5 times. Mm-hmm. And then we got in the car. I was like, all right, we're not going to the candy shop. We ran out of time. Took too much time. And my 6-year-old was all pissed at me, but I was like, look, if you don't want me to ask you to do things a bunch of times, do them. And if you don't, them's the breaks, kid. And so I think what it has done, it's not necessarily in the moment, solved the hyper rational behavior that comes with a 6-year-old, but it's at least given me a framework to talk about these two things are connected to each other. I understand you don't want me up in your business as much. Okay. I want you to take care of your shit a little more. And I'm just going to expect it. I'm not going to be up in your business as much. I'm just going to expect you to take care of your shit. And when you don't, there's just going to be consequences that are connected to you not having done that.
I think that works. I think, but also just I think sitting up is a little in bed is different from not leaving the playground.
It is, except that it's her ignoring requests that I'm making.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And her not wanting me to make requests of her, or in her words, tell her what to do. She's like, you tell me what to do all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think, honestly, she was right about that. I was telling her what to do too much, which was connected to me. The fundamental mindset shift that I'm trying to go through is I am trying to move away from feeling like I need to take care of her all the time.
Yeah.
And toward being I don't know, a guide, an advisor, a support. Obviously there's things she can't reach. And so I need to reach them and bring them down to her. But if she can reach it, I don't need to be getting that thing for her all the time. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm getting that thing for her all the time, it also makes me feel entitled to make more demands of her.
Yeah. I think that is the way, man. It's just the hard part is staying calm when you do it and not yelling at them.
Yeah.
Because the move on that, letting her sit up during bed, books and songs or whatever up until the second you leave is this is going to be a slightly longer bedtime. You just need to be okay with that.
Yeah.
And signpost that you may be awake for another 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Or 40 minutes or something, and just, and you kind of signpost, you plant those little seeds, when you're trying to leave the playground. Hey guys, listen, we might not have enough time to go somewhere if we don't go now. Hey, if we don't go now, and then that happens, stays calm. The problem is half of the time, if I don't have my shit together, it comes out like George Costanza or something. I'm got Seinfeld on the brain, but it's you see what happens? We're not going to get the candies. No candies today.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Milkless. We are self-funded, self-sponsored. Matt and Max, we're spending way too much time a week on this for your listening pleasure. So, if you want to help out, please visit our Patreon. Just kidding. We don't fucking do Patreon. We're not asking for any money. All we want is for you to text this to a friend. So, if you could pause the episode right now, think of someone who might benefit from Milkless. Maybe it's a dad a mom someone
Think of the shittiest father you know.
No, that shittiest father doesn't care enough to listen. But someone who maybe likes podcasts and, the thought of a parenting podcast is oh my God, it's so dry. You can tell them how funny I am and how Matt
also says things sometimes.
Yeah. You need a dictionary to understand half of the things he's saying because he likes to show his big vocabulary.
Oh my God. So, read a book, Max.
Anyway, what was I saying? So just pause the episode right now. Text a friend. It means so much to us, and you will ensure that we will continue making these episodes free of charge forever.
The impulse that I've noticed that I struggle with is how to put more stuff in her court and remove myself from doing some things for her without removing my connection to her. Mm-hmm. After all this had happened, when she was hey Dad, can you give me a bagel? My first inclination was to say something where the refrigerator, where they are, where the toaster is, where the refrigerator is. Mm-hmm. And to do it in a way that was kind of
snarky.
And on a more fundamental level, in removing my help, I'm also going to remove my loving demeanor. Mm-hmm. And so I had to check myself and be like, yeah, totally. Like, this is something you can do. I have this weird natural inclination. It's like, well, I'm not going to baby anymore, so I'm just going to treat you like a fucking asshole. So keeping that like emotional, positive, like connection while removing some of the like assistance that she doesn't really need and probably doesn't benefit from at this point.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's always the money. If you can keep it casual. And I feel like we've said it before, like when we sometimes get mad at our kids, like finish your plate, finish your dinner, Matt. Like if you came to visit, Matt, finish your dinner. Like you'd never say that. So,
No.
so it's like,
Yeah, it's wild.
but it's similar with like I love, urging the kids to get their own things. I also kind of like getting things for them if they're asking politely, but I also ask them to get me stuff quite often.
Mm-hmm.
I'm laying down. I'm fucking exhausted. They're up. I'm like, hey, bud, you mind grabbing me a glass of water?
Yeah.
And for a while, maybe they kind of like, oh, come on. I'd be like, all right, cool. Well, I get you water all the time. I'm going to remember that, buddy. I'm going to remember.
Yeah.
And then literally they ask for water 10 times a day. So that would happen like 40 minutes later. Dad, can you get me water?
Nope.
Like, oh man, no, remember?
Yeah.
Like we don't get each other water anymore.
Yeah.
So why don't we go up and get it?
We don't get each
together?
other things in this house, apparently.
No, like keeping it chill. Like if I asked you to, Matt, can you grab me a glass of water? And you're like, no. I'd be like, okay, well.
Wow. Cool, man.
I'm not getting you a glass of water.
Yeah. That's a good point. I have found I do a similar thing with my kids where I'll ask them for something if they're like just closer to something. Hey, could you grab that for me? And I've actually found that generally, unless we've just like had a tiff or something, the response I get to that is really good because it makes them feel useful and important. That I think that is a great practice to just be like, hey, could you do me a favor? And even actually, interestingly, because my 6 and 2-year-old will sometimes end up at each other's throats and my 2-year-old drive my 6-year-old crazy. But if I ask my 6-year-old to help with something with my 2-year-old and kind of like give her some responsibility and like, we're trying to get out the door. It's like, hey, could you help the, I'm trying to not say her name. Could you help the smallest of friends put her shoes on? Like my 6-year-old's like, yeah. And then she's like really good with my 2-year-old in those situations where she's kind of officially been given, so like a task.
Yeah, 100%. I think that the thing to do is find a way to slowly, it doesn't need to be overnight. Where like, oh, you make your breakfast for the rest of your fucking life, bitch. It's like,
yeah.
You've reached the age. But it's like, oh, bagel, cool. That's something that you can make. Like, let's do that.
Yeah.
If it's a beautiful Sunday morning, you want to, it's like, hey, Dad's making breakfast for everybody. Boom, boom, boom. But then sometimes it's like, okay, you know how to make a bagel. That's cool. Can you make me one?
Yeah.
You want to split it? You never fucking finish your bagel. So why don't I eat your second half?
Yeah. Yeah. And totally.
You make both. Great.
That, it kind of creates the kind of dynamic you want to. The last thing that I was thinking about, because I was saying at the beginning that when an idea like this kind of like lodges in your brain, suddenly you're saying it everywhere. Mm-hmm. One of the best articulations I saw this, I was listening to Dr. Morgan Cutlip's book because we're going to have her on the podcast and talk to her. And I want to know what the hell I was talking about. And she makes this point that like, we know that with babies, the most important thing to do with babies is to make sure their needs are met so that they feel safe, they feel taken care of, they're not living in the survival part of their brain all the time. But we kind of extrapolate that out too far as they get older, thinking that like what kids need is just to have all their needs met. And really, she makes the argument in her book that actually there is some data out there that being too good a parent kind of hamstrings your kids a little bit.
Oh.
What they ultimately they need to figure out how to get their own goddamn needs met. And if you're doing that for them and you aren't continuously making that adjustment, which just sucks to have to do, to be thinking about all the time, but you are continually adjusting away from that start as a baby where you are meeting all their needs to eventually a point where theoretically they can do that for themselves.
Yeah. I mean, and this dovetails in perfectly with the Instagram reel you just made recently about how your daughter was playing on a slide, having a great time. You're at a beer garden, and then you went over after 20 minutes, and he's like, "Dad, like, I'm scared," and you kind of like blew up the situation.
I fucked it up. Yeah.
Right. And it's like,
just by being there, just by showing up.
right. And what something that you've said to me a lot on the show before is like, how much of that is actually for the child, and what percentage of it is it for you? Mm-hmm. And that's what's kind of weird sometimes. Like, I love the kids so much. I want to be the best dad so bad. But then also, sometimes when I don't know what the fuck's going on with me, and I'm like super tired and like down, I know that like, if I can just be with my kids, I know that I'm like doing the most important thing that I value.
Yeah.
So I just like, if I'm just with them, mm-hmm. then it's better. Then I'm doing good job, Maxie. You're good dad. Yeah. And it's like,
yeah,
it's like, so similar with your thing. You probably had a little bit of guilt for whatever reason. I'm having too much fun at this beer garden with my friends. Look at that girl. What if I am depriving her of a connection with her father?
Yeah.
And then she's going to grow up and be in therapy and saying, my dad was really fun, but I don't even know him.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're like, yeah. I better go over there.
I better go over there
and do something. And it's
dude,
like,
you're so fucking smart. That's such a great point. Like, just keeping tabs on how much of it is about you. You know, actually, as I'm thinking about it too, on that playground at the beer garden, there were a bunch of other kids on that playground, and all of them had parents right there.
Yeah.
And probably what I did is I looked over and I felt like the absentee parent whose kid had just been mm-hmm. solo climbing up and down this thing for like 20 minutes. And I was like, oh, I should really.
Right. Because the other parents must be thinking, oh, that poor child. Mm-hmm. And then you felt what they were not actually thinking, but what you thought that they were thinking. Oh, that poor child. You projected that onto her and her, when she's 27-year-old therapy session, like, poor me, my dad. I was the only one on the playground. I was the only one on the playground without my dad. And it's like, that's coming from.
Even though I know in my head that the data on the importance of unsupervised play is like unequivocal, and that like we all like that's something we fuck up so much, like culturally as parents, particularly in this country. I mean, I remember you talking about the culture shock of going back and forth from Amsterdam, and how parents in Amsterdam just weren't up in their kids' fucking grill so much. So I know all that, and yet, so yeah, there's the like peer pressure parenting piece, and then I think too, it's like the insanity of like so many things about parenting make you feel kind of like a crazy person, and one of them is you're like, stop needing me so much. Stop needing me so much. I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted. And then the second they pull away, you're like, my heart is broken. Like, you don't need me anymore.
I'm a terrible father. They need me so bad. I should be out there.
Yeah. And it makes it harder to do the necessary, like, just allowing them to move away from you in the ways that obviously they need to.
Well, outside of like turning this into a cult, because we should cut this one here, but if we did start a milkless cult, there should be some sort of chant that just reminds us, that's like, as long as you love them and don't hit them. It's great. Because that's, I think, what the standard probably was. And it's like, and we turned out all right. It's like this analyzing of every minute detail of their life. Oh, if you don't hold their hand on the slide until they're 4, they're going to have attachment issues. It's like, literally get fucked.
But don't tell them you're proud of them or they're going to be fucked up.
Yeah.
It's insane. It's insane.
Okay. So whatever the mantra is, let's work on it over the next few episodes. Or if you're listening, hit us up on Instagram. We need something like love them, don't hit them. You're good.
Yeah. Oh, let me just end with this, and then I promise we'll stop, because, and this is, if you listen to the episode last week where my eldest daughter learned about the fairy in our backyard, I got a little update there. So, it was really sad, but like, this is one of those, like, she's older now moments. So I took both of my kids to the crystal shop, and my eldest daughter, and it's called Shiny Things for Shiny People. Shout out, because it's a cool little shop in Austin. The owner's always there, and he's the bomb. And my oldest daughter, comes up and whispers to me. She's like, I want to get something here for my little sister that comes from the ferry. But how do we do it? How do we sneak it? Because she was there. And I was like, okay, you got to go up and talk to the owner at the front desk and tell him what we're doing.
Oh my God.
And so like a big fucking kid, she went up to this guy she'd never talked before and she told him the plan and he was awesome. And she picked out a thing sneakily and she took it to him and he snuck it into a bag. And then like we took it home and then she snuck out in the yard and put it in the ferry house. And then she was like, let's go for a walk tonight. We walked out and the 2-year-old found it. My 6-year-old was just beaming. She looked up at me and she was like, this feels good. And then my 2-year-old held this little treasure and fell asleep with it. Actually, she almost fell asleep with it in her hand, but she wouldn't stop playing with it. So I was like, put it on the bedside table. And so she fell asleep with it on the bedside table. And that was how our day ended. And it was a good night. It was a good night.
That is incredible. That is amazing. I got one question though.
Yeah.
Are you crying?
You're crying. Shut up.
Brought to you by Violet Archer. I like it because they're solving the case.